If you've been looking for a crossover that can do some light off-roading and drive you completely hands-free when you're on the road, Chevy has a new crossover that might be interesting. So welcome in to our review of the 2024 Chevrolet Traverse. We're going to begin with a walk around of the RS trim level. So this is the most expensive and the sportiest version of the Traverse. They have this and the off-road focused Z71 model for us to review on this first drive program. I'm loving this red that it comes in. It really just accentuates the sportiness of the RS trim level. You get a black bow tie, which is really cool, along with this big black grille. You also have the RS logo there as well. The headlights have been split. A lot of automakers are doing this now, where you have kind of the top headlight and then you have the main projector down here. You also get some nice lighting animations only on the RS trim level of the Traverse if you're willing to spend the money on it. Really attractive wheels here. We've got black 22-inch wheels. You also get some sport suspension that you don't get on other Traverse trim levels. And you can see that the area surrounding that is also a gloss black rather than like a matte plastic or a body color. You can see that Traverse is also blacked out as well. Now you can get like a midnight package on kind of the mid-level trims of the Traverse as well if you're not willing to spend quite as much to get this RS trim, which we'll talk about a little bit later. If you're not willing to spend that much, they do have some like sportier packages on sort of the mid-level models as well. We've got this new kind of GM style taillight where it kind of splits off into a Y. There's some lighting animations on the taillights as well when you get the RS trim. You get quad exhaust, which is kind of like a new thing for the Traverse here. And then you have some badging letting you know whether or not you have all-wheel drive and what trim you have. And that's pretty much it. But I think we should probably move on to the inside because that's where some of the more major changes have taken place on this new Traverse. Now, as I open up the Traverse to show you the interior, I want you to keep in mind that the RS trim is the most expensive, so they're not all going to be quite as nice as what I'm showing you, but I also drove the Z71 and that was pretty close. Here on the RS trim, we're going to get standard leather seats. These are heated and ventilated. I believe this is actually the only trim where you can get ventilated seats. Heated seats, I believe, are available on most trims. Now, the RS has this nice red stripe here. You also have RS embossed here. You can also have Z71 embossed here if you get that one as well. That one has a very similar interior to this. The difference is the Z71 can have cloth interior, and then you option to leather. The RS is going to come with leather as standard. And we have some red and white stitching here on the seat. We've got power seats. This is actually a very comfortable seat. I do like it quite a bit. We also have some red accents here. Both the Z71 and the RS have this kind of red. I believe it's a little different between the two trims, but it is kind of cool, gives it that sporty touch. The thing that you are really going to notice here is that this is a substantial improvement in kind of technology from what we would get in the previous Traverse. The previous Traverse was kind of your basic generic GM interior, but this is a huge step in the right direction. This is a 17.7-inch touchscreen, comes standard on every single 2024 Traverse. Looks great, works great, wireless Android Auto, wireless CarPlay, 360-degree HD cameras. This is standard on every Traverse. I know some people have trouble parking large vehicles like this. Having this standard is absolutely crazy to me, so it is really nice. GM has packed a lot of safety functions in this car as standard, one of which is also adaptive cruise control. That is something that GM used to charge extra for. Now, I really like the functionality of this screen, but we do have some hard buttons down here. We've got our fan speed. We have temperature controls down here, so they haven't gotten rid of these completely, which is nice. You also have a volume knob up here. Part of the screen is kind of dedicated to just 3 buttons. You actually don't have any physical light controls anywhere, so they actually live here on the screen like they do on the Chevy Colorado. You also have a digital gauge cluster that is very easy to use. You just have one button right here to customize it. So you can have your tachometer, you can have your Google map, you can have kind of a screen with your safety stuff. You can have a more basic screen if you don't need a tachometer and all of that other stuff. And you can customize what's on either side. You can actually do that here on this screen. So if you're wondering, there is some customization here. I was playing around with it the other day and somebody from GM showed me where it was. It's somewhere on here. I just wanted want to let you know that that is possible. We do have a wireless phone charger down here, cup holders here, little storage here, good place. I like that it's closable too, so you can put something valuable in there that people won't be able to see. And I love how on a 3-row crossover like this, you know, you might not be able to see if some kids are blocking the view out. You've got your digital rear view camera, which is a nice touch. And we do have a nice large panoramic roof as well. GM said that the old Traverse had kind of a split piece. This is a much larger panoramic roof that stretches all the way to the back, and it does look really nice. So I am really impressed with this RS trim. I'll mention this a little bit more when we get it out on the road, but you can see we do have Super Cruise here on the steering wheel. That's going to be standard on the RS trim, but it's available on all but the base model. Now, as we move into the back seat, the Traverse keeps things strong. We've got captain's chairs here on this RS model. You can get a bench seat here, so the Traverse has the capability to seat up to 8 people. When you get the captain's chairs, obviously you're going to be limited down to 7. You can fit 3 in the 3rd row as well. We do have an armrest, just a single one on both sides of these captain's chairs. They are adjustable as well. The leg room for the kids is really nice. We've got 41.4 inches of rear leg room, which is actually like a 3-inch increase over the previous generation Traverse, which is really nice. We do have our climate controls down here. We only have heated seats. We don't have ventilated seats like some other vehicles in the segment have, but we do have 2 USB-C ports and a household outlet, so we can keep our devices charged. Now, interestingly, if you get the bench seat, only the, I believe it's the 40 section is going to slide forward, making it really easy to get into the 3rd row. But if you get the captain's chairs, both of them are going to have this function. You just click a button, it's going to tip and fold forward. It did that all by itself. I really didn't have to nudge it forward at all. So you can keep a car seat there as it's doing the folding, and it gives you a really, really nice opening up here into the 3rd row, where we can get 3 people decently comfortable for a crossover. Now, it's interesting because GM says that they've improved 2nd row legroom by like 3.1 inches, but they've actually decreased 3rd row legroom by like a little over an inch. So something to consider. The 3rd row is just okay. We do have air vents, and they're actually right in front of you rather than being up here. I actually kind of like that positioning here. You do have cup holders on both sides, and you do have USB-C ports on both sides, so the kids can keep their devices charged up. You get one of those buttons right here, making it super easy to get out of here. So as far as 3rd row goes, 3rd rows go for a crossover. Pretty good one in the Traverse. Now, if you're looking for cargo space, which is something that I think a lot of people shopping in this segment, the 3-row crossover space, are going to look for, the Traverse is fantastic. In fact, it's actually the best in this segment. You cannot get a bigger crossover until you step up to like a full-size SUV, like a Tahoe or a Suburban. You can see even with the 3rd row up, we've got plenty of space back here for a ton of bags. Even if you run out of space, you get a little bit of storage here underneath the floor. You can see my backpack fits under there just fine. I even have room for a 2nd or even a 3rd one. Now on the RS trim, we've got these power seats for the 3rd row. Usually these are manual on lower trims, but now you just have to hold these 2 buttons. They go down super fast, just like they do on the Tahoe and the Suburban. And that is going to open you up to 98 cubic feet of space. The Toyota Grand Highlander is close, but I think this beats out the Grand Highlander by about half a cubic foot. So if you're looking for the biggest crossover in the segment, but you don't want to step up to like an Expedition or a Wagoneer or any of those full-size truck-based SUVs, the Traverse is going to be the one. Now, you can also fold down the 2nd row using these 2 buttons right here. They only go down automatically. They don't go up automatically. On lesser versions of the Traverse, you don't get these buttons. You will have to walk around to the side doors and put them down. But in terms of storage space, Chevy made the Traverse even bigger, and honestly, there's really no substitute for it. Now, if you consider yourself a little rugged or outdoorsy, the Z71 might be the best trim level of the Traverse for you. This is the most off-road focused version. Now, Z71 used to be like an off-road package for Chevy's trucks. It has since expanded to its own trim level. You can see that this looks a lot more butch and tough than even the RS version of the Traverse. We've got the black Chevy bow tie. We've got some red tow hooks down here, and then again we have the Z71 logo in the grille. It's a pretty nice looking vehicle. You've got about an inch lift over the standard Traverse, so a little bit more ground clearance. which pays dividends when you're going off-roading. We do have some underbody protection as well. That's what you're gonna want so that the underbody of your car doesn't get damaged. We also have smaller 18-inch wheels, not the 22s that we get on the RS, with a lot more sidewall. We also have a Goodyear Territory Wrangler all-terrain tire, again giving you a little bit more grip. We've got a slightly different suspension tune on this guy as well. We'll talk about that a little bit more when we get it out on the road. This is a pretty rugged looking crossover, not quite as rugged as some of the Z71 trucks that Chevy makes, but again, this is a family hauler. They toned it down just a little bit. We do have the sort of half roof racks there. Taillights pretty much the same. We've got our all-wheel drive standard here on the Z71 with our Z71 badge down there. And then we have our quad exhaust tips once again, and the towing package, which is hidden underneath this little cover, actually comes standard on the Z71. All right, so now let's get the 2025 Chevrolet Traverse out on the road. And I think we've already talked through most of the important stuff that families, buyers of this vehicle are going to care about, namely the storage space, the seating capacity, all of that. But you might care about the engine, so let's get into it. The 3.6 liter V6 engine that was available in the previous Traverse, that is gone. It was actually a really great engine with 310 horsepower and 266 pound-feet of torque, but the engine they've replaced it with is pretty great too. It's a 2.5 liter turbocharged four-cylinder. It's actually closely related to the 2.7 liter four-cylinder that's in the Chevy Colorado, the Cadillac CT4, and a bunch of other vehicles as well. And it outproduces the old V6 by quite a bit. It has 315 horsepower, so 5 more horsepower, and way more torque with 317 pound-feet. And not only is this engine more powerful, it is also more efficient. You can expect to get about 2 mpg better in the city when you get front-wheel drive, or if you get optional all-wheel drive, you'll get about 1 mpg better. I know those aren't huge improvements over the previous generation, but it is nice that they've managed to combine giving you more power, more torque, and more efficiency. And speaking of how the power goes out, you get an 8-speed automatic transmission. GM is still just so good with their transmission tuning. You really just don't notice it most of the time. If you need a quick downshift, it's right there with it. The 8-speed automatic, tuning is just fantastic. It can send power out to front-wheel drive as standard. All-wheel drive is optional, and if you get the Z71 specifically, you're going to get a special twin-clutch all-wheel drive system that you won't get on other versions of the Traverse. And if you do need to pull something with your Traverse, it can tow up to 5,000 pounds. Now, in terms of how the Traverse drives, it's pretty comfortable. The Z71 I actually drove yesterday with the 18-inch wheels with the big, nice sidewall because it has the all-terrain tires, and it was super comfortable. This RS trim isn't quite as comfortable because it's riding on 22-inch wheels that don't have quite as much sidewall, but it's definitely not an uncomfortable experience, even with 22-inch wheels. Now, interestingly, while I was driving the Z71, I noticed there was really not a lot of road noise, even from the all-terrain tires. I'm actually getting a little bit more road noise in this RS model, maybe because of the low-profile tires. Hard to tell. I really have only gotten a brief opportunity to drive the Traverse here, but it's really nothing that you're really going to notice. I'm driving without the radio on, something you're probably never going to do. Overall, this is a very comfortable and compliant family car that should be pretty pleasant for any families that want to drive it. Now, back to talking about the engine briefly. I will say that this new four-cylinder definitely does not sound quite as good as that old V6. That V6 really was a champ. You could find it under the hood of vehicles like the Camaro, so it definitely had a sporty element to it. But I think people will appreciate the low-down torque of this four-cylinder, and if you really get on it, it pulls really hard all the way to the top, and it actually sounds even meaner and growlier as you start getting to the top, as you start approaching 5,000 RPM. Which is pretty interesting. So I actually think it sounds better here than it does in the pickup trucks, where they kind of tune it to sound overly growly and mean. It just sounds a little quieter, but then a little raspier up at the top, which I tend to prefer. And I got to talk about the really nice safety features that we get on this car. We talked about things like the 360 camera, automatic emergency braking, you get adaptive cruise control standard, you get a ton of standard kit on the Traverse, which has been a new thing for General Motors. They used to charge you extra for all of that. Now, on the RS trim, which we're driving now, we actually have Super Cruise as standard as well. So I'm actually on kind of like a country back road right now, and GM has said they have improved the number of roads that you can use Super Cruise on, and look at that, we're doing hands-free driving. I'm not on the highway, I'm on just kind of like a normal country road in Georgia, and this thing is doing all the driving for me hands-free. And you can get this on every trim except the base model. So it is nice that it comes standard on the RS, but even if you want a more affordable Traverse, you still will be able to get Super Cruise. It comes in a package with Bose audio. They say that's just like a preference for people. If you're going to get Super Cruise, you probably want good audio anyway. But Super Cruise is still the best hands-free technology that I have used to date. It can go around slower traffic by itself, or it can do the lane changing using the turn signals as well. But look at this. I am driving on a country back road hands-free. That's something that is really impressive. I've never used it on a road like this before. This is going to make family road trips. I know how stressful those can be. You got kids all in the back, all their stuff, they're crying, whatever. Anything to take a little bit of stress off the parents is great news, and the fact that you can do a lot of your highway portions and even some of your back road driving hands-free, I think parents are going to love it. All right, so that's going to wrap up our first drive of the 2024 Chevrolet Traverse. All that's left to do is talk about how much it's going to cost you. The base LS trim is going to start at just under $39,000 before destination. If you want all-wheel drive on any of these trims, add $2,000 to the price, just so you're aware. The LT trim is going to bring things to just over $41,000, again adding $2,000 for all-wheel drive, while the Z71 package that we drove, that's almost 48 grand, but it does come with all-wheel drive as standard. The RS is at the top of the range. It's about $55,500, add $2,000 for all-wheel drive. Fully loaded, you're looking at about 58 grand for one of these. So it is, you know, on the higher end of what a three-row crossover can be. There are more expensive options out there. There are cheaper options, but as I mentioned, there aren't any bigger options. So if you want maximum space, you're either going to be getting a Chevy Traverse, or you're going to be waiting for the GMC twin of this, the GMC Acadia, or the Buick Enclave, which is basically going to be this, but a little bit more premium. I think that Chevy did everything they needed to do to keep customers who were buying Traverses before interesting. They kept the size, they added much better technology, they've improved the fuel economy. While I don't love the four-cylinder engine quite as much as I did that V6, I think that most customers are going to be completely fine with it. They're going to be completely agnostic and not really care. So if you were looking for a Traverse before, or you're currently just looking for a three-row crossover that's really big, the Traverse is definitely something that should be on your shopping list. I hope you've enjoyed this review. Be sure to like, subscribe, and ring that notification bell to be alerted of our latest videos, and I'll see you next time.